Chapter 14. Back from the Dead. Silhouetted against a deep red, darkening sky, Harry, Jensen, Simon, and Dippy each climbed over a dry stone wall and into the grounds of the old servant's cottage. The passage of time had long since claimed the wrought iron gate where Charles Theodore III tied his horse Graham. But the thick iron fittings that held the gate were actually still there, though rusted and distorted. The cottage now had no roof, but the steps to the first floor were still very much in place, and they dipped in the middle where over hundreds of years they'd been worn down by countless historical footsteps. An old and gnarly tree grew at the front of the cottage. It was the infamous hanging tree, and one of its branches could be reached from the top of the old steps, just as in olden times. Here is a photo of the actual hanging tree as it still stands in modern times and keeps its own legend alive.
"I'll go first, dudes," whispered Simon. "Okay, take up your positions, lads," whispered Harry. "Why are we whispering? There's nobody out here, not for miles," whispered Jensen. "I don't know, man. Maybe it's because we don't want to wake up the dead."
Harry's spine tingled and goosebumps raced up and down his entire body.
"That's nonsense. The story of Charles and Molly is just that. It's a story, and it's probably not all true. Is it?"
He was trying to comfort himself as much as possible, because they could all feel that something wasn't quite right here. It was like time itself had stood still.
"Off you go then, Simon,"
ordered Jensen.
"Roger that,"
replied Simon as he flipped his leg over the thick, dusty branch and pulled himself into the tree, then shuffled his way along to where he needed to be. Harry, Jensen, and Dippy hid behind the old cottage wall where they had a good view of the narrow country road that ran adjacent to the ruined building. It was a full moon and conditions were perfect. Simon had shuffled his way along the tree branch and was directly above the road. All they had to do now was wait. Harry glanced at Dippy. He was undoubtedly a different person now. It was as though he'd awoken from a bad dream. "Maybe when I'm older, I'll be a psychiatrist or something, because I seem to know what I'm doing," mused Harry to himself. Then his train of thought was interrupted. The first lights of the evening were speeding towards them.
"We've got a customer, Simon. You know the drill. Get yourself ready and keep out of sight, lads," announced Harry excitedly.
The lights drew nearer, and as they did, the noise of the car's engine echoed eerily around the fields. Simon gripped the knotty branch with both hands and dangled his legs down over the road. The car's headlights lit up Simon's legs, and the legend of the hanging tree was about to strike again. The male driver of the car screamed in horror. Its female passenger then joined in. The car slowed for a second as the driver tried to focus on the lifeless, swinging legs. Simon held his nerve and didn't move an inch. That was enough for the driver to be absolutely convinced that he was seeing the ghost of Charles Theodore III, and he gunned the engine of the Ford Cortina, and in a second he was gone. His red lights blazed off into the distance, and soon the only evidence that it was ever there was the sweet smell of the 1970s uncatalyzed exhaust fumes. The boys leapt up from behind the wall and howled triumphantly.
"Wow! Did you see their faces, guys?" shouted Simon from the tree.
"I think they were scared shitless," laughed Jensen.
"It looked like they'd seen a ghost," added Dippy. "My God, Dippy lad, you actually made a funny joke then," said Harry.
It was Dippy's first ever joke, and it went well, so he tried another one.
He was as white as a bottle of milk. He was as pale as a bucket.
That one wasn't funny, and didn't even make sense, Dippy lad.
Oh, sorry, Jensen.
Simon jumped down from the tree and joined them.
"Did you see that, guys? You've got to admit that one was the best one ever."
"It was a good one," agreed Harry.
"Yeah, the best ever, Simon," said Dippy,
who instantly realised that this was his first time.
Tonight. I mean, the best ever one tonight."
"Oh yeah, I suppose so," agreed Simon, a bit confused.
"Phew, I got away with that one,"
thought Dippy.
"Whose turn is it next then?"
asked Harry. Jensen had already worked this out. "What about Dippy? If he's going to be in our gang, then he has to go next. This can be his initiation ceremony." Dippy had no idea what an initiation ceremony was, but he didn't care. He was going to be part of a gang, and he would do anything for that. Especially if it was just a silly dare, because that would be so easy. I mean, what could go wrong? All he had to do was hang from a tree over a speeding car. So he proclaimed,
"Yes, I'll do it."
"Are you sure about this?" asked Harry.
"Yeah, absolutely. Bring it on."
"Okay then, Dippy lad, you go for it."
"Will do, Harry, will do."
And Dippy headed up the worn stone steps and climbed into the tree and prepared himself. Jensen waited until Dippy was out of earshot.
"Here we go now. This should be a good laugh,"
he whispered.
"Do you think this is a good idea, Jen? I mean, Dippy's never done this before, and the car will just be a few inches below him. It might be a bit dangerous."
"Absolutely, Harry. Let's see what he's made of."
"Yeah, we might be just about to see what he's made of."
But Dippy didn't even think about the danger. He was so high on adrenaline that he could have flown up that tree. He readied himself for the signal, and he didn't have long to wait.
"We've got another customer, guys. Get ready, Dippy."
A car's headlights beamed across the fields, then illuminated the tree. Dippy's moment of glory had arrived. He gripped the branch above him and swung his overly long legs down so they hung low over the road. This was it. All his life he'd wanted to belong, and now he did.
"Ow!"
Dippy screamed like a crazed banshee, thinking that the roar of the engine would cover the noise. It didn't.
"What the bloody hell is that?"
asked Harry.
"I have no idea,"
replied Simon, his mid-Atlantic accent completely slipping again. But Jensen thought he knew. "It's the bloody ghost of Charles Theodore, that's what it is." And as the unearthly wailing continued, he shouted, "Everybody, run!" They didn't need to be told twice, and off they scattered. Dippy was enjoying himself too much to notice. His legs were swinging wildly like a palm tree in a hurricane. They weren't supposed to do that, but he was so high he just couldn't stop them. What a time he was having! At last his life had begun, and he howled some more in celebration. Ow! The car slowed down when it caught sight of the dangling legs of the supposed hanged man. The occupants then panicked, as they usually did. Then they hit the accelerator, as they usually did. And in a second, they too were gone. But oddly, the howling banshee noise had also gone. The only sound now was the rapidly disappearing throaty exhaust note of a Triumph Stag car. And then, total silence. The boys were in a bush at the side of the old cottage.
"What the hell was that?"
asked Simon, still spooked. "I've absolutely no idea," answered Jensen. "But I'm not hanging around here to find out. Oops, pardon the pun."
Harry poked his head out of the bush. "You can get down now, Dippy," he whispered,
so as not to awaken the ghost again. But there was no reply.
"Come on, Dippy lad, it's time to split,"
said Harry, a little louder this time, but still there was no answer. The boys climbed out of the bush and stood under the tree. Dippy had vanished.
"Where the hell is he?"
asked Simon, now even more spooked. I don't know," stuttered Jensen. "And I don't want to know, because I'm getting the hell out of here, right now."
"And I'm joining you, dude." "What about Dippy?" asked Harry.
"Maybe he had one of his fizz bombs and he flew away."
"Forget Dippy, dudes. Let's just go."
Harry stood there for a short time on his own, looking up at the creepy hanging tree. There really was no sign of Dippy. He'd completely disappeared. But Harry felt responsible for him, and he would never leave without him. An owl hooted, and Harry almost jumped out of his skin. And then he changed his mind. "Wait for me, lads!" he shouted, and he ran as fast as his legs would carry him. He would come back for Dippy later, or maybe even tomorrow. Yes, that's what he'd do. And without further contemplation, off they all sprinted. At last, the boys arrived back at the village, out of breath and panting furiously, but ever so glad to be back in the normal world, with lampposts, houses, and definitely no ghosts. It was very late now and past all their going-in times, so the conversation had to be brief.
"See you tomorrow, guys," said Simon.
"Yeah, see ya," replied Jensen.
Hey, wait a minute, lads. Aren't we forgetting something? Or someone?" asked Harry.
No, I don't think so, dude," lied Simon. No, I don't think so either," added Jensen. Harry was aghast.
"Dippy, you know, Johnny Dip, the newest member of our gang, the fourth musketeer."
Jensen and Simon just looked at each other. It was now pitch black, and there was no way on earth that they would be going back up there.
I haven't got the time, man. I gotta go. Like right now, dude."
And without waiting for a response, Simon scurried off.
"Well, that just leaves you and me, Jen, the two original musketeers. And when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Isn't that right, Jen?"
"Jensen? Harry turned around, but Jensen had also gone. I'll see you tomorrow, he shouted from a fair distance away. Oh, and good luck in finding Dippy. Thanks a bunch, Jen. I'll do the same for you one day. Harry then took a deep breath and called upon all of his courage, then said, Nah, I'm not going back up there on my own. Not on your bloody Nelly. And off he went. So, just what did happen to Dippy? Well, we had to wait years to find that out. So I'm not telling you yet. You'll have to wait, just as we did. But, as they used to say in 1976, answers on a postcard, please. Eventually, Harry did make it to bed, and as he stared sleepily at his ABBA poster, he felt very contented. It had been another good day. He'd had his usual telling off for being late back, but he was used to that, and it was nothing he couldn't handle. And yes, he had lost Dippy, but he knew he'd turn up tomorrow, or at some point. So that was nothing to worry about, probably. It was turning out great being a good person, and the being nicer theory was still holding up. It was far too hot to sleep that night, so he just lay there and smiled, and thought about how fantastic the rest of his life was going to be now that he was a better person. But unfortunately, it wasn't an exact science, as he was about to find out, because you can only be at the top of a roller coaster for so long, and then where do you go?